Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on how to secure your property and evidence. This is a very well-received class because not only with the state of where things are today and things that have been happening across the country, I think the need and desire to be able to understand how to secure your property and evidence facility is of great value and importance, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to bring that to you today. And we are so thankful and just for the graciousness of IAPE to be able to present this training for us today, for you today actually. And we have over 450 agencies represented here today. That's a tremendous amount of people and agencies, and that just shows how great this need is. And the IAPE, they normally present this topic during their two-day training class that they provide. So they were willing to offer this at no charge, obviously, and just because we feel that it's so important and so we are so passionate about you being able to secure and care for your property and evidence. And just a little bit about IAPE. I know some of you probably have attended their classes. For those of you that haven't, the International Association of Property Evidence has actually been around since 1993. They've instructed over 25,000 property room professionals in all 50 states and also the provinces of Canada. And their goal, along with our goal here at File on Q, is just to really ensure that anyone who works in the property room, whether it's a supervisor, a manager, a property and evidence technician, that you deeply understand the complexities, the nuances, and the liabilities of caring for the evidence and the custody of the evidence in your property rooms. And so this is why we're doing this today. And this is why we're sharing this with you, and we are very excited to do that. A little bit about us as File on Q. We have a lot of customers here today, but there's a lot of you out there that don't know who we are or what we do. We are a public safety solutions platform company. We provide software for physical evidence, digital evidence, quartermaster, fleet management, personnel records. And beyond our software, we're made up of a lot of former law enforcement. Everything that we build, all the training we provide, all the services that we do are built around their expertise. So we are very proud of that, and that's one reason we wanted to do this today for you and provide this, because we feel it's just of such tremendous importance for all of you. We are based out of Seattle, Washington. We have law enforcement professionals all across the United States that currently represent around 370 public safety customers with a very high satisfaction rating, just because I think of where we stand being based on a law enforcement background, which really helps us serve you well and provide you things that you need and not what we think you need. And so that's our goal, and that's one reason we're providing this for you today. A little bit about the format of the class is your phones are muted. And that's so you can hear us, we can't hear you. And when you have 400 agencies with you, it's really hard to open up those phone lines. But we know that you're going to have questions during the class. So through your GoToWebinar interface panel, you should have a questions option. We're going to encourage you to submit those questions at any time during the class. We have a number of people from IAPE here that will be fielding those questions. They're going to do their best to answer them. If there's time, we'll open up some of those questions and share them verbally with you and get Joe's answers around those. So this is going to be great. Somebody said they're not hearing me. If you're not hearing me out there, please maybe type in. So let me know. We've got a few people that have said that. So if you're hearing me, maybe in the questions area there, just say, we can hear you. Make sure I'm being heard. So anyways, from here, we also want to share too, at the very end of the class, we're going to be presenting a very short survey that will happen when the class closes out or you leave this webinar today. The purpose for that is number one, did you like it? Was it what you expected? And would you like to see more of it? And how can we provide future training for you? We think we may be able to do more of this in the future, but we want to hear back from you. So please take a minute or two. It's super short, just to let us know how we did. And we're also going to be teasing a solution at the end of the class. We're going to have our president with us about a recovered property platform that will allow you to return property back to the public way easier than you're doing it today. And we're going to tease and share that with you at the very end. So stick around for that. We're going to just take a minute or two to introduce that to you. Okay, so from here, I've done enough talking. I want to introduce Joe Latta. Joe Latta will be our trainer today. Joe is a retired police lieutenant from Burbank, California. He's instructed over 800 of these IAPE classes, And he is tremendously well versed in this. He's also done over 100 audits for law enforcement agencies. So needless to say, he knows his stuff. So Joe will be our trainer today. And then along with Joe, we have Ellen Spain and Rick Meadows with us today. They'll be the ones that will be feeding your questions. So if you have those questions, they'll be the ones that are going to doing their best to keep up with them. So good luck, Ellen and Rick. So I think from here, Joe, are you out there and are you ready to rock and roll?
I am still here.
Okay, all right. So Joe, I'm going to pass this over to you. I'm
Okay.
going to, maybe we'll just enable your camera here and bring you live. So I'm going to send you that request, and then I will pass everything over to you. And it's on its way right now.
Okay.
I'm going to make you the presenter. So once you get that prompt, you're ready to go.
All right, make sure it's all. How are we doing? Craig, you can see everything right?
Yes, I can.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. As I'm looking at some of the names on this list, I see a lot of you that I've met over the years in our training classes. And because of the things that are going on in our environment today, not only with the COVID virus and some of the civil unrest, so we thought a very appropriate topic would be security. And our training, the way we do it nowadays, is just completely changed. And so we're kind of giving this as an example of what one of our modules. We have 18 modules in our 2-day class. It's exactly the same as the live class. Oh, it's been completely reformatted since the last time. It's kind of like watching Netflix. And so what I want to do is I want to get started. The vast majority of up front is the module we use in the class just to talk about security in general. And there's not a right way or a wrong way. There's many ways of doing it, but we're going to try to base this on what our standards are. So number one, our security. Let's move on and look at the topics. If you've ever been to a class, we have to share a lot of headlines. We're going to share one, only one. We're going to give you a security survey. We're going to talk about doors and hinges and keys and locks, who should have access. We're going to talk about key control, after hours access, and access logs, and lastly, some of the access or electronic systems that may be out there on the market. So first of all, before any good module, we have to have a headline. Now, if you had been to the 2-day class, or if you go to the 2-day class, what we're going to talk about in this one, we would have discussed some of the security issues when it comes to drugs, money, and narcotics. So let's listen to this for about 20 or 30 seconds.
County individually wrapped kilos of heroin, potentially worth more than $500,000, were stolen from the Will County Sheriff's Department. ABC7's Robbie Batewell has the story that's new tonight here at 4.
It is a shipping container like so many others, but this blue box in a fenced-in yard at the Laraway Service Facility of the Will County Sheriff's Department contained evidence that was stolen sometime before last Friday, October 14th.
We weren't certain, frankly, at the time, was it missing or was it just misplaced? Could it be in the courts? It took us 3 or 4 days just to conduct an audit of that. We're now pretty confident we don't have control of that item.
The heroin was wrapped in 4 1-kilogram packages and was worth approximately $500,000.
Everyone, the key to this one, if we had visited some of the other modules, they have drugs for narcotics. And if you've been to the class, we see guns, money, and drugs are the most susceptible item for a theft out of a property room. And it's almost always adjudicated cases. So what this department is doing is keeping drugs, $500,000 worth of heroin, in a cargo container at their corporate yard. And we usually have the class vote on this. Is this felony or misdemeanor stupid? And folks, when you understand that you got $500,000 of dope in a cargo container down at your garage, it kind of gets into the category of felony stupid. The drugs need to be kept in an area with the highest level of security until it is actually destroyed. In the 2-day class, we talk about how to document that, how to audit it, and a variety of other tasks. But again, it's security here and where we stored it. Okay. Now, here's an interesting one. Facts. Burglar breaks window of property room, police department, uses a power saw to breach a metal evidence room door. steals 46 pounds of marijuana and 9 guns. Everyone, the headline is behind that. These are kind of the facts around that. And in a 2-day class, we would say, is there a clue here on who may have broken in? Well, as a 5-year veteran burglary detective, any crook that brings his power tools would think that maybe the person had prior knowledge. Well, the suspect had prior knowledge. He watched and put it in the evidence room when he was booked, okay? Very, very, very small department up in Utah or Idaho, and very small, 6 or 8 people. For all of you, if you're in a very, 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 very small police department, there may not be anybody in your building overnight. You're probably more susceptible in a larger department where you may have activity in your building around the clock. So what we say about this, small departments or departments in rural areas are more susceptible to burglaries, as there's sometimes during the day, no one is there. So during our class, we always give a survey. What I want everybody to do is go back and look at lockers. I want you to look at fences and gates and rooms, anywhere where evidence may be, especially on temporary lockers, which we have a whole module on. Look at it and see if there's some type of code on the bottom of that lock. And some of you are saying, yep, I think there is. So the question is, can I take that lock or that number to Home Depot and get a key? And the answer is absolutely yes. So now you have an employee that has a key to that room, area, locker, or whatnot. Now they're going to have access to that room forever. And if a defense attorney were to ask a question about that during a trial, could somebody have gotten a key to that? And your answer is going to have to be yes. So when we're done today, I want you to go look at your padlocks. Next, you'll notice that padlock there is secured to the gate. At least if somebody were to take it, they'd have to cut the chain. It would be a trail that there's a problem there. So always, I don't like padlocks. I like, and again, it's always a budget issue, but always keep that in mind. If you have to use a padlock, secure it to whatever it is, the door frame or whatever. Next, that's called an astragal. If there's any Scrabble players out there, that's good in a Scrabble game. That is that plate that goes between the metal door frame and the door. This kind of gets an A+. It's got 2 levels of security, 2 keys. And again, that's a pretty secure. This is an exterior door on a property room. This next one here, and I want you to take a very close look. This here, you'll notice the gap. Can I reach through there and open the door with a coat hanger? And the answer is yes. So what do? It needs some type of guard there so somebody can't reach through there. In fact, we were doing an audit there, and in fact, we did open the door and get into the property room, to the amazement of the chief who was standing there when we did that. Let's move on here. Always look at your hinges. That's an exterior door to a property room. This particular police department had guns, money, and narcotics just sitting on all the shelves, no specific areas for guns, money, and narcotics, no separate security. If anybody had opened that door, taken the hinge off, gone in and taken something, you would have never known it was missing, until somebody went to look for it 2, 3, 4, 5 years later. So always look at your hinges. Ideally, a hinge should be on the inside, and you can buy security hinges. Can I get into your property room? I probably couldn't, but can someone get into your property room through a T-bar ceiling? We asked the question during all of our classes, is that possible? And I would say 20, 30% will raise their hand and have that sheepish look on their face. Yeah, you probably could. You can get in through the locker room, you get through the restroom. Everyone, look at your T-bar ceilings, and can I get in there and take something, climb back out, and would you ever know it was gone until you do an inventory? And inventories, that's another topic. We don't do as many as we should. This is a department up in the Northwest. It's a narcotics locker. We're not advocating you should do this, but this is metal rafters, welded plates on those rafters, concrete block, and all the cells are poured. Everyone, that gets an A+ for a drug room. And again, you have to, it's always a budget issue, 100% of the time. But I think you'd have to agree that would be a difficult room to get into. Let's talk about doors, hinges, and frames. There's your evidence room. Interior hinges, metal-clad doors are always going to be preferred. Metal door frames, that's probably the best way you can do it. Keys and locks, those are always fun. Remember, you always have something that someone else wants. Let's take a trip down to Beaumont, Texas.
In a routine traffic stop along Interstate 10, Officers Froman and LaChance seized 350 pounds of cocaine hidden in a load of furniture. Tom Schofield is Beaumont's chief of police. He remembers the bust as the department's crowning achievement.
Probably the largest seizure of cocaine that we've had, either through search warrant or any other way.
Lieutenant Mike Seeley, then a 14-year veteran of the force and the commanding officer of the Narcotics Division, made headlines.
It's the biggest seizure of cocaine in the history of this area.
We're very proud of the abundance of narcotics that we were seizing.
In fact, Beaumont's PD was seizing so many drugs that they ran out of room to hold them. So they converted a jail cell into a property room to safely lock away $30 million worth of cocaine. It took 6 file boxes to hold the dope. Because the area was highly restricted, only a few high-ranking narcotics agents and civilians had access to the evidence room.
Property officer must go with the officer to unlock the area, and it's checked out, and then it's checked it back in again, it's weighed both times.
For months, the cocaine sat untouched. On occasion, the evidence was checked out and used for training the department's K-9 unit.
Drugs are checked periodically.
But what no one in the department knew is that the mountain of cocaine was slowly being siphoned away, brick by brick. Unbeknownst to anyone, an extra key to the evidence room existed, and the person who held that key was secretly removing the stash.
They went to go check out a kilo for training. That's when they discovered that not only was one box gone, all 6 boxes containing the drugs was all gone.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is $31 million worth of drugs, and they said they were using it for training. I hope the status of the case is adjudicated. I hope we're not using active evidence. And if it is adjudicated, if the case is over, write us a note on a question and tell us that you think a dog needs $31 million if you're a dog handler, if your dog needs that much to train with. I would suspect that probably that much dope in your property home, it becomes a target. I want you to look at all the employees in your organization and kind of look at a secure closet in your organization. And you say there's 3 bags of marijuana. Do you know anybody in your organization that would steal them? And you all say, absolutely not. If you put $31 million worth of dope in that room, does it become a target? Are people interested in it because of the value? For those of you who have not been one of our classes, the dope from cases that have been adjudicated, you've got to get them out of your property and destroyed as quickly as humanly possible and have regular disposals. And again, that's going to be predicated on the size of your department. A 5-person police department may do it annually. If you have 150 officers, it may be quarterly or twice a year. Get it out, move the target. Fact, officer on duty. This is another newspaper headline from Pennsylvania. Officer on duty the night of the theft. Officer was seen buying a padlock that matched the property room locks. Department surveillance had been tampered with. There's 2 things here to learn. He was able to replace the lock so no one would know he did it with an inexpensive, such as the lock I showed you a few minutes ago. And secondly, the surveillance had been tampered with. Let me tell you what that means. There was a camera system, there was an access system. All of their electronics were in a closet in a mechanical room within the agency that was not locked. He just went in and unplugged it. And again, any type of surveillance equipment, access should be under lock and key with limited access who can go into that room. Here we are at State College, Pennsylvania. Evidence custodian gets duplicate keys, quits the department, moves, turns in the keys, comes back for a visit 2 weeks later, uses the keys, steals the money, gets arrested. Are we changing locks and keys when we change personnel? Turning in your keys is not the answer. And we're going to have some discussions coming up here about changing locks and keys. So we have to have a quiz. Do you take your keys home at the end of the day? I can tell you my 30 years in law enforcement, when I was the sergeant and lieutenant in property, I took my keys home all the time. Does anybody see a problem? Well, the problem is And you say, well, this would never happen, Joe. Could you take your keys home and go to bed and put your keys on the dresser, and maybe some family member takes those keys and goes down to the property? Everyone, remember, we don't all live in big police stations. Some of us work in all sorts of different facilities that have been remodeled, and it houses 6 or 8 officers in rural areas. Could a family member go in there? And you say, well, of course not. Well, let's read what happened up. It's a Salt Lake newspaper, but this came out of Cedar City, Iowa. 3 juveniles arrested for stealing 23 pounds of marijuana from a highway patrol locker. They used a key that belonged to the father, who was the evidence custodian. This is like a 6-person detail that works in Cedar City. If you're not familiar with rural law enforcement, it's not unusual for them to close down 8, 9 o'clock at night, come back the next morning at 6 o'clock. There's nobody there in the middle of the night unless they get called out. Well, Dad came home for dinner. True story, folks. Dad comes home for dinner about 5 o'clock, eats with his family and teenage son, and is telling everybody about the great bust they made during the day, and goes back to work after dinner, works for 3 or 4 more hours, comes home at the end of the day, and goes to bed, and puts his gun belt away, puts his keys on his dresser, and his 17-year-old son heard the conversation. He's been in the station since his entire life. He's been in and out of there with his dad. So it takes the keys, goes down to the local highway patrol station, makes entry. There was no alarm. That's kind of the key too. That's always a problem. We don't have alarms. And if it wasn't for a very alert Cedar City police officer noticing activity at the back of the building, they make the arrest. And I'm pretty sure that somebody's saying, Joe, where do you get these stories? That would never happen again. Wrong. That would never happen again. Here we are in Beckley, West Virginia. Fact, captain's wife takes the keys, steals the money from the evidence room. Wife arrested. Judge, quote, unquote, every piece of evidence in that room became tainted. Last bullet there, divorced. So when you take your keys home, if you do, are they secure? So who has access to the property? And this is always good for a debate I don't want to use the word debate. It's not right or wrong. Different size departments have different needs on who has it. But let's ask the question, does the chief or sheriff have access? Do command level people have access? Does the facility manager or locksmith have access? Let me say this about the chief and the sheriff, and I hope some are listening in. But if a kilo of cocaine is missing in your property and an investigation is opened up, who has to be a part of that inquiry? Does the chief or sheriff, command level people, don't they all have to be a part of that? So I know most chiefs and sheriffs have said they do not want to have access any longer, and they hate bringing in a third party to do the investigation. So our advice is probably not to have, you have a 2-person police department, the chief may be the evidence custodian. So there's not one statement I can make that fits everybody, but understand if you are a ranking officer and only have a key because of your rank, you may not want it. It's something to think about. If you've never been to one of our classes, we have about 80 pages of standards. They sort of look like this. I've kind of dropped these in here. You can download them whether a member or not. And it says standard 8.2, a written policy should permit only authorized personnel have access to the property room storage areas, and no one other than property unit personnel should, let me underline that word should, have keys or mechanical electronic access. Everyone, we would ask the question, does that sound like a good idea? You get to make that decision. Another standard, the manager / administrator who has oversight of the property unit and the chief sheriff, chief executive officer of the agency should not, folks, we didn't say they can't, we said they should not have independent, unescorted access into the property room. So for chiefs and sheriffs, if you need to go in there, probably to protect you from any investigation, is to always take someone with you. If one of those individuals has a key or access, that should establish a system that requires 2, which I just said. Let's talk about key control. I like the idea of having people sign for them when they become a member of that unit. We want to number them and we want to audit them every year to make sure that the employee still has that particular key. Now, as Craig mentioned at the very beginning, we're going to ask some questions. We're going to do 4 and see how everybody's doing. So Craig, if you wouldn't mind bringing the question up.
Sure, I'll be happy to do that. So I'm going to bring that question up on the screen for everyone. You can interact with it right there. We'll give everyone about 25 seconds or so to put their answers in. They are anonymous, so we're just trying to get a gauge of the room. So don't be embarrassed or shy. And we got about 20% of you have voted, so we'll give it a little bit longer. And we've got about 50, we're getting pushing on 50% here.
Folks, we encourage you to participate because you can kind of see the status of property rooms across the country. Don't feel bad if you don't, because I'm going to say in the final results here, we're going to find out that maybe 30 or 40% may not be doing that. It's just a good practice.
Yep, that's great. So we're about there. I think I'm going to close out this poll here if everybody's got a chance to answer here. So 3, 2, 1, I'm going to close that poll. And I'm going to share those results with everyone here.
Wow.
So Joe, are you seeing those results?
Yeah, I was really off. I said a third of us don't. It looks like close to half of us aren't. Everybody, do we think we should change our locks and keys with personnel? That is absolutely an outstanding example of what we're talking about. Let's move on to the next topic here. We're going to try. Let's see. All right. All right, key control, best practice. Change locks for all personnel changes of people who may have had access, including the evidence officer, supervisor, and manager. Everybody, a good practice. Lock changes. Here's an example. It's called an interchangeable core. You can use those in padlocks, or you can use them in the core in any door. They used to be $20, $25. They're a little bit pricey, but when the personnel change, someone in the organization has the key to that core. You send them an email or order it online. Only certain people have access to it. It goes out UPS or FedEx the next day, and that key person is the one who gets to change it. So they're called IC or interchangeable cores. Do you change your locks? A combination locks, and I would say 90% of us don't. I've even done audits where the property officer has written the combination on the top of the safe. Folks, change your locks, change your keys, change your combinations. It's a good practice. Standard locks, access codes, combinations is, and again, like I said, here's one of our standards. We should change them when there's a resignation, termination, retirement, etc. Let's talk about after-hour entries. Let's do a poll on this one. I'm ready, Craig.
Okay, I'm going to bring up the next poll here. I know a few of you were saying you couldn't interact with the buttons on the screen. We'll give this a try again. Let's give it a shot and see if it works for you this time. So I'm going to launch that poll. You'll be able to interact right within that poll on your screen, so you don't have to send it through the questions area. So I'm going to let everybody chime in. Everybody's going a lot faster this time, so I think we're getting the hang of this. So we've got about 30. Go ahead, Joe.
I was just reading it for him. Okay, but go ahead.
Okay. So we got about 60% of everyone there. And you can read that if you want, Joe, but we got.
Joe's going to guess here. 40% are going to say yes.
40% say yes? Okay, well, I think you might be surprised. Looks like we've got most everyone chimed in here. It's going to respond. So I'm going to go ahead and close that poll, and we're going to show the results. So let's share results. And there's your results, Joe.
Yeah. Everybody, those of you that are in that yes category, you always have to be careful who has keys, because they are part of the equation if something is ever missing out of the property room. So let's move on here if we can. Let's see here.
Okay, and I will hide that. There you go, Joe.
All right, let's talk about written policies when it comes to after hours. So we're going to call these after hour protocols. And again, if somebody has to go in, what is the reason for it? Well, they have large bulky items, $31 million worth of cocaine, and then sometimes it's an emergency. So again, those are probably legitimate reasons for having to go in and people having access. If we were in a class, which we're not, but if we were in a live class, I would ask everybody, what is an emergency? And they would say things like a large submission, maybe there's a water pipe that breaks, and we get a whole bunch of different reasons. And frequently, somebody will say a fire, and because Joe's kind of a smart person, I say fires are sometimes, depending on your problem, could be a blessing and not an emergency, okay? But obviously, a fire is going to be an emergency, but you should have protocols when someone goes in. After our procedures, the absolute best thing we can do is to call the property officer out. Even in some cases, you may have to pay some overtime. When we have somebody else come in and check it out with that key that's hidden in the organization, that's not the best way. So the property officer's not available. Let's think about it. You're the on-duty sergeant, the on-duty officer in command, or officer OIC, the watch commander, whatever the term is, and you know where the missing key, I won't call it the missing key, the hidden key is, and you go in and take care of that action. That's understandable. I don't like it. I like calling the property officer out. But let me suggest that anytime that you have to go in that scenario, that you go in with a second person to protect you, and always document it on some type of access log. Now, after our key solutions, what do you do if you have to have a key? I've seen people put it in like a combination key box in some type of a safe that only limited number of people can open up, sometimes in a Knox box. Most police officers are familiar with Knox boxes. The fire departments have those to gain access to buildings. I saw one department that had one of those break glass and a little tiny hammer on to set off an alarm button. I saw one of those in a dispatch center once. In order for anybody to get the keys, they had to go in and break the glass in front of a half a dozen dispatchers. So that's kind of you're not going to really do it unless you had to. So, there we go. Let's do it once more here. Written policy. Again, folks, you'll notice down there it says not preferred. I don't like the key, but if you have to do it, sealed in an envelope with evidence tape, initialed by the commanding officer. And if you do have to go in, that other person has to go in. They have to write a memo why they broke the seal to get in. And that key and the envelope go back to the commanding officer the following day, and with that reason why they had to go in. This just makes everybody accountable for going in the property room. After hour access, let's talk about that. After hour access by non-assigned personnel should be discouraged. In the event that after hours access is necessary and assigned property room staff are not available for recall, police should restrict the method of entry into the property room. At no time should one person enter alone, 2 individuals. And again, this is re-emphasizing it. Where we got this was from our standard. Continued, suggested that an assigned property officer be called in, like we've discussed. But most of the things we talk about in our class, we can go back to our standard. Let's talk about access logs. Date and time. I would encourage that everyone have an access log. You keep them long term. Managers should be taking a look at them once in a while, see who's entering the property room, but it should have the date and time of the entry, the date and time of the exit, the reason for the entry, name and serial number of that employee, who accompanied them, and long-term retention. That one, it says who accompanied. For those of you that may be new in the property room, Detective Smith comes down to look at a 500-pound safe that came in last week, and it's in the back of the property room. Don't say, Detective, it's on the back corner there, it's on down on the floor, it's on a pallet back there. Escort them back there, help them, and escort them out. Do not ever let anybody come into your property room unless you're escorting them. That is a good practice. That's what the log may look like. If you come to a class, that we got tons of logs and documents that you may be interested in. Let's talk about electronic. We could probably do 8 hours on electronic access and cameras and whatnot. We're probably going to do 5 minutes or so to kind of give you a kind of an overview of what's out there. We're going to talk about locking systems, alarms, videos, and data retention. So when it comes to locking systems, all you have to do in the Google and run something like swipe cards, and you'll run into 500 vendors. The swipe card is very much like you would see in a hotel room. Proximity cards, and it's got a chip inside of it. You walk up to the door, it reads it and says, that's you. Scramble pads, as you walk up to the door, you'll notice the numbers there are in a random sequence. When you walk up to it and you would enter, the screen goes in that random pattern, and then you hit your number so somebody can't shoulder surf behind you. Just another technology. Biometrics, that may require a retina scan and a fingerprint and or a PIN number. It takes a number of different tasks to get in. Facial recognition and retina scans. And what else is out there? It changes hourly. And I know when I started teaching a lot of this in the class, I had been the project manager of building a new building, and I really felt like I was an expert. But if you wait about 2 weeks, it will all change. You really need an electronics consultant to come in and advise what the best products are out there. As we all know, we can watch everything going on in our neighborhood, and the technology has gotten a lot cheaper. So some of the benefits for the electronic systems are it limits the access to authorized users only. It tracks, you can track it in. There's methods of tracking it when you go out, monitors the date and time, and if an employee leaves, the administrator of that goes in and can change them, and you're not having to call a locksmith in to change it. In fact, let me go back to that one. The electronic systems, folks, I've done a number of audits recently in the last couple of years where everybody has a hard key and everybody has the electronic. And when you ask the question, can you get in your room with using the key? Yes. Well, do you use the key or do you use the keypad? Well, sometimes it's no, sometimes yes, sometimes no. Folks, if your employees have both a key and an access pad, can they go into the property with their key? And the answer is yes. Are we tracking them? Why did we spend the money to track them if we're not going to use it 100% of the time? That's good for a lengthy discussion within your organization. Now, alarm, if you have an electronic system, it can set off an alarm if the person goes in that's not allowed. It can send an email or text message that someone's in there. So if you're the sergeant, the lieutenant, and you see that Bob, the evidence custodian, went in on Saturday at 3 in the afternoon, it sends you a text and says who it is and that they're in there. And you say, well, I know that. He went in there to do X, Y, and Z. But you can get alerted immediately what employee went in. And it always acts as a deterrent. When it comes to alarms, Craig, it's that time again. And I'm going to say,
it is that time.
I know the answer already. Let's bring it up.
Okay, well, I've launched that poll.
Do you have some type of intrusion alarm to the property room?
And I know some people said they were having trouble doing the poll. We've noticed that some of the errors for people not being able to do it is because they were in full screen mode. If you take your presentation, how you're viewing it out of full screen, you might be able to answer. So just for those of it out there that that was an insight from some of you watching it, they found a way to fix it. So give that a try. We're at about almost 70%. It's going to be the most highest turnout yet, Joe. 72%. Going to go a few more seconds.
I'm going to say 30 or 40% don't have alarms, and we'll ask everybody if they see that as a problem, and I'm only guessing.
Okay, well, we're going to show you right now. So I'm going to close out that poll, and I'm going to share those results with everyone.
Wow. Everyone, should we have an alarm on our property room? And it looks like a very large number of us don't. So for all of you, when you're done with that, run back to your boss and say, hey, boss, everybody's got alarms, but we don't. But the fact is, a lot of you don't. Good practice to do that. So let's go on.
Okay. Okay, there you go, Joe.
All right. It's misbehaving here. Here we go. Let's talk about alarms. And we're going to talk about each one of these for at least 20 or 30 seconds. Intrusion alarms, duress or help buttons, refrigeration alarms, and smoke and fire. All right. When you have an intrusion alarm, that's when you have contacts in your doors and windows. Yes, property rooms do have windows. Any type of duct work. We have people escape out of jails through duct work. Can somebody get into your property room through the duct work? We should always have some type of motion sensor in the room. And if you have a flat roof, I've seen departments that will have a seismic alarm. In other words, somebody walking on the roof, it'll pick it up. Duress buttons, depending on the location. If the public's not coming to your counter and you're in the core of the building, might not be important. If you are in a satellite facility, you have all civilians, there's no police presence, I would always encourage it. Or a way of communicating. I know there's property rooms out there, they are so tight, their phones don't even work inside. I know one agency, they all carry a lanyard around their neck. It's a help button. It's like, help me, falling and I can't get up. It lets dispatch know there's a problem in the property. But we're talking about a large facility too. Smoke alarms may be mandated by your fire department. It's a budget issue, as you're going to have to pay for that every year. And it should be at a place where it's monitored 24 hours a day. When it comes to refrigeration, it may be mandatory for some types of biological evidence. It should be monitored 24 hours a day. It should be on your backup power system for any type of refrigeration. You don't want it to go down on, you're off on Friday. You don't want it going down on Friday morning. Everybody's off. They're working a 4-day week, and you don't know you have a problem until Monday morning. Next, monitoring it 24 hours a day. Who does it? Dispatch, the officer in charge, private alarm company, property officer or supervisor. You get to choose. And I always like a third party to be involved in it and make sure that other people aren't tampering with the system and 2 people working in cahoots to get in to the property. So a third party is just a good idea. It's going to be your choice and what works best for you, but it's going to probably be a budget issue. Let's talk about videos. We're going to take our last poll. I'm ready, Craig.
Okay, here it comes. That poll is up. Looks like we've got about 66%. It'll go a little bit longer. A lot of you are polling in here, so and you're thinking about it, maybe looking around. We have cameras. So we're good. I think we're about there. I'm going to close that poll out, Joe, and I'm going to share those results. There's your results.
That's great. Everybody, if we'd asked this question 7-8 years ago, it would have been exactly the opposite. But because of the cost of cameras and storing the data, it's something we can probably do nowadays. Okay.
Yep. There you go.
It's back to me. All right. Okay. Placement of cameras, entrances, doors is probably a good idea. Any transaction counters, any temporary lockers, any destruction area, places where you store your guns, money, and narcotics. Again, where it says lockers, I like it. I like a camera on both sides. Over the years, officers have been 100% sure they submitted something in the inquiry. Nobody can find it. And after a couple days, the officer, oh, I found it in my car or whatever. You can resolve lots of problems real quick by having those cameras on your lockers if something is missing up front, during the time of submission for that 24 or 48 hours. So how do we activate them? Obviously, we can do it with motion sensors. If an alarm goes off, if there's broken glass, if a contact is broken, all the cameras can come on. So motion sensors are always going to be preferred. When it comes to data retention, VCRs have kind of gone. DVDs are gone. So we're starting to see servers at our city hall or remote server, cloud computing. If we'd ask anybody about cloud computing 5 years ago, everybody would go, oh, no, you can't do that. Well, it's like digital photographs. We're doing it, okay? And again, anywhere you have any equipment in your organization to store all of the backbone systems, make sure that you have it secured in some type of caged area with very limited access. We don't want the property people going in there. We want to be able to have a kind of a neutral security system that is managed truly by a command level person. Here's one. We're going to go through it real quick, and we're about at the end of this first part of the module. City IT employee makes access key to drug vault. City IT, we're going to stress IT employee gains access to the vault. City IT employee steals thousands or hundreds of pills. City IT employee arrested. City employee now ex-city employee and sentenced. Who makes your access cards, everybody? We can have a 30-minute discussion. We won't, but when you leave, have a discussion. Can they get in there? And if so, maybe we need to make sure you have an alarm, and that alarm, that person does not have access to. And when it comes to alarms, if there's a PIN number, all of our employees should have separate PIN numbers. When it comes to the retention of data, problems are generally identified after years, not days. Long-term retention is always, always, always encouraged. And again, the cost of that has plummeted over the years. Now, here's something that I would say 3 or 4 weeks ago, we would probably not have a lot of discussion about, but as we all watch the local news, we've had some issues out there. And so I started thinking the other night, what can we do to sort of fortify our facility? You know, the building has been built. You have what you have. So I've got some real quick slides for all of you to take with you and just to give some consideration. So we have evidence rooms that are in our main facility. We sometimes have a remote warehouse, and sometimes we use public storage. So what should we look for? Look around your building, and the interesting thing there, those are relatively new police facilities. And what do we notice? Lots and lots and lots of glass, because we're trying to make them very friendly. Well, depending on your glass, you can get bulletproof and you can get lesser than bulletproof. And again, it's always a budget concern. If you have bulletproof on the first level, that makes sense, but do you need it on upper levels? I took a picture here of the facility that I worked in, and I kind of give you an illustration. The truck drives by, and if you look directly through where the truck is, there's windows. Those were not bulletproof because they were like 10 or 12 feet off the ground. So the trajectory would have been up. Where at the right side of that arrow, somebody walking by, that may have been bulletproof. So you have to do an analysis of your building and see where the susceptibility is. Here, something to always consider as an add-on is you can get louvers, security louvers to put in front of your windows. And this is especially, you've already designed your building, and now with having the civil unrest, that's an option out there. So do we have cameras around our building? Is the lighting good? Look at the planter down below and look at those removable bollards. The photograph on the right is a bollard, okay? They can lock, a padlock on there, you can take them out if you need to move something, but you can put those in front of your facility so at least you can't have a car drive through your lobby. The design that you see there, you notice they would have to go up the steps, they would have to maneuver, and they can't through the planters, so it would be somewhat difficult. So maybe we make it a little bit harder. Let's talk about that satellite facility. And I know a lot of you work in a satellite facility, and there's two quick options here, folks. You work there all the time, or you take stuff there for long-term storage and you go visit it. So let's remember, having the best lights we can possibly, lighting around the building. The advent of the LED light has been absolutely fantastic, the amount of light that we can put on something. So that's something for us to consider. The next one, do we have cameras? I hope you do, especially today. Next, an alarm system. And I know a lot of you, we saw 2/3 of we looked at the numbers for alarms in general. Sometimes it's even less in these remote facilities. I would recommend an audible alarm to scare the person away possibly, and a silent alarm that rings back to our dispatch center or the alarm company. Another one, everyone, we probably don't want a billboard out in front saying evidence room is here, and then big signs on it, evidence room is here, and we've seen it. What we want to do is probably have something like P&E in here. So, and again, this worked for people, let's say it's at your corporate yard where you have all your mechanics and carpenters and everything. You just don't want to publicize it. And if possible, I wouldn't put anything on there, but sometimes if the public has to go there and pick up something, you need some signage, but don't overdo it. When you're moving evidence from place A to B, don't drive around with a billboard on the side of your truck, okay? No signage is probably a pretty good idea. Any type of fencing you can put around the entire perimeter of those remote locations is probably a good idea. If you're having an issue, if there's any type of looting going on in your community, obviously regular checks, you may have to assign somebody there to watch it during off hours. And this stuff is so new, folks, we haven't had to worry about this. So public storage, you can see my opinion about them. I don't like them, but some of the issues, there's my evidence in my locker. Who's your neighbor? When you bring things in, are your neighbors watching what's going in there from the truck that says evidence? Be very careful and know who your neighbors are. And the next issue is if you're in an older facility, they could be made out of plywood or drywall or some type of fence that you can see through. What you want to make sure if you're signing a contract, I'm going to discourage it, but the newer ones are generally with some type of constructed metal, galvanized metal. So, and always have an alarm and a camera if when possible. Whoever you're renting it from may provide that for you. And in closing, property and evidence management, if you've never been to a class or need it for your certification, IAPE.org. It's 2 days, 14 hours, and now you can do this completely online. It's just like Netflix, or Prime Time. It's exactly the same as the 2-day class, exactly the same. The nice thing is you can watch it at your convenience. The registration is good for 30 days. If it needs to be extended, we can do that. And the tuition is the same as the live class. And at the present time, we're just looking for all sorts of different options. We can provide training to everybody. And with that, if you sign up for a class, some of you may know, I wrote a book a couple of years ago. It's about 400 pages. That the digital book is free anytime you attend any of the online classes. I want to thank everybody for attending today. The turnout is just absolutely spectacular. We're going through some tough times, all of us, with budgets and staffing, and we're here to help you. If you have any questions about any of this, please contact us. I think Craig has a few. We do encourage you to answer the survey at the end, so we know what way to go with any future training. This is kind of a practice for us. Craig, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I want to thank Craig very much for putting this together. This is his expertise. It wasn't ours when we got into this. Craig, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. That was excellent. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to do this today. We do have a few words from Steve England, who's our president here, just wants to share something really briefly, and we're going to get everyone out of here. So, Steve, are you out there?
I am. Thank you. Well, we want to thank Joe and IAPE, and Joe, you got through it all in an hour. That's impressive. So, good job there. Very, very practical advice and suggestions there. And so, thank you again for that, and everybody who's attended. What I wanted to do is, again, you saw those of you who are at the waiting room of the meeting here, you saw FoundDrop being talked about. We're real excited about FoundDrop. It's our newest solution at FileOnQ, and it proactively unites the found property and the lost and recovered stolen property that you get with the public. And it's a really revolutionary in its scope and the way that it works. So we want you to be able to check that out. One of the great things about it is that the community, those who lose things, can go online and file a report, and they can describe things in ways that are much more detailed than a paper form could do. They can put in pictures and so on. And then the great thing is that as you add in evidence into your Evidence on Q system, if there is a match to what they've reported, it will automatically let somebody know, hey, this appears to be a match. It will do that for those who have reported things stolen. But even more exciting is it will also let other agencies know and people within your agency that, hey, here's something that you said that you were interested in, and we've recovered this piece of evidence, and I think it might be connected with your case as well. So it really does what you're collecting the evidence for, which is to solve cases, and the good news, gets it off your shelf in a very proactive way. And so it's an exciting product. And again, we love the way that it's part of our public safety platform. And we've got a webinar coming up July 14th that'll show how all that works. You can certainly go out to founddrop.com to get a look at FoundDrop. Don't have to use it as part of our platform, but it works with our Evidence on Q and Digital on Q, and to provide you a complete solution for all of your property and evidence, digital, physical, and lost and found as well. So excited about that. Thank you for, again, attending this, and appreciate Joe and his insights and expertise, and IAPE, and we have partnered with them since well, long time, and they've been a great partner. So hopefully you found this very beneficial, and we hope to do something like this in the future. So please be looking for those as well.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Joe, thank you, everyone. Make sure to do that survey at the end here if you have a little time. And we appreciate everybody attending. Have an amazing day. And we look forward to seeing you for our next webinar. Goodbye, everyone.
Woo. Are you there? Hello?
Rick's still here.
I'm here.
Ellen's still here.
This is Steve. I'm still here as well. I don't know that Craig has dropped off.
I'm
but
still
Steve,
here.
you're
I'm
there?
still here.
Okay,
Let's
good.
go ahead and take this. We'll take this out of the webinar. We got some people that are still migrating out, and we can. Great job, everyone. Let's do a phone call, maybe, or another session here.
You want to do it?
I'm
Go to
going
me.
Yep, I'm going to close this out, and I will send a go-to meeting to everyone.
I'll be
Okay.
here.